listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What a great couple of days it's been since the launch of episode 100 of the Straight to Video podcast. I want to say it means a lot for everyone to show such great support and feedback to this journey so far. Today we're going to keep things rolling all 80s movie and music style, as I had the absolute pleasure to chat with John Parr, who is responsible for penning theme songs for huge movies from my growing up, such as The Running Man, Three Men and a Baby, and of course the smash hit Man in Motion from the iconic Brat Pack film St. Elmo's Fire, which to this day is undoubtedly one of my all-time favourite songs. Now, for someone responsible for bringing a soundtrack to the lives of many American teenagers during the 1980s, what some of you might not realise is that John himself is an English lad from just up the road from me, originally from Worksop and now living and working from his home studio in Doncaster. This alone makes his story super interesting to me. Quite simply, how did a working class kid from the middle of the UK manage to take over the American airwaves during the biggest pop culture decade there's ever likely to be? Before we dive into our chat, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that has got on board and become part of the new Straight to Video Patreon page, which is now up and running at patreon.com/STVpod. I really was blown away by everyone's generous support, and I think this is going to be a really fun add-on to the podcast, which will build a cool little community and help grow the show. Big shout out to all the patrons so far, who are Joe Pizer, Gareth Tregadon, Bradley Mabbott, Stuart McNichol, Ryan Haynes, Chris Annabel, Dave Prince, Rebecca Robson, Joe Maddox, Matt Blackout, Chloe Hartshorn, Bill Walter, Carol Hodge, Phil Newell and Karen Whitehead. If you want to get a shout out on the show or check out all the cool things on offer, then head on over to patreon.com/STVpod to find out more. Also, our friends Dead Skull Coffee continue on their path to bring you the best kick-ass rock and roll coffee in the UK. And you can grab 15% off by using the promo code STV on checkout at deadskullcoffee.co.uk. They've been supporting the show for a while now, and I'm proud to have them alongside it. Okay, let's get into this chat with John Parr. For someone who has really seen and done it all with such a long, impressive and successful career, it was truly great to see how humble and friendly John is. His love and passion for not just his music but music in general still shines through, and it's a joy to listen to. If you want to learn more about John's career, then everything can be found at johnparr.net. Hope you enjoy hearing all of John's great stories from Worksop to Hollywood as we listen to my straight to video talk with John Parr. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm glad we finally got to hook it up. It's much appreciated.
Whereabouts are you?
Well, that's where I'm going to start off, actually, because I knew you had your roots in Yorkshire and the Doncaster area, but I never knew you was from Worksop, and I'm just down the road from, the Ripley and Heanor area.
All right. Nottinghamshire.
Yeah, just off Junction 26, so not far at all. It's been really cool for me, for someone who's your music. It's really part of my pop culture DNA, if you like, in your songs, and ties to a lot of my favourite films, so it's pretty cool.
Oh, great, man.
For you to be like a local lad for the best part. lot.
Yeah, yeah.
How often do you get to revisit the old area? Do you still have family and friends there?
Let me think. I did something for the BBC about 3 or 4 years ago on the One Show with Cary Grant, and we went back to the first gig, the Miners' Welfare at Worksop. So we went and had a look at that. We didn't go. I was born in Manton, which was kind of the wrong side of the tracks in Worksop. I've not been down there for probably about 10 years and looked, but it much the same. Buildings are a lot cleaner because the pit's shut.
Yeah. Everywhere where I live, it's all proper pit area and all this kind of thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
If it's okay, I certainly want to hit on your time working on movie soundtracks from some of the blockbuster Hollywood movies. But I believe that must have been extra special for you because I think you were quite a movie fan growing up, visiting the local cinema.
Worksop had 3 cinemas. They had the Regal, the Embassy and the Gaiety. I mean, amazing for a 50,000 people town. Yeah, used to go to the Saturday morning pictures like as a little kid, 7, 8 years old, and watch Ghost Riders and all these kind of, cliffhanger cheap B pictures. And then in the afternoon, it would be the Gaiety, go up there, and that'd be the Saturday matinee. I loved it. And I used to watch those credits go up and dreamed of one day being involved in it. I used to do the talent shows there as well. That's how I used to get him free. I used to sing, and if you won, you got him free next week. And I was little Cliff. I'd go in and do Bachelor Boy or whatever,
Did you enjoy the music from the films back then? Like either the songs or like the musical scores? Was it a big deal for you?
Yeah, and certainly, I suppose stuff from the 60s, like all that Lalo Schifrin stuff and, the Dirty Harry, all that classic Hollywood big brass. Oh, I loved it. And of course, the great theme songs, because there was always a great theme song at the end of the movie. And I mean, that would be a dream to write it, let alone sing it,
Was you a solo cinema viewer or was it a bunch of mates all went at the same time?
Well, it was one of those, if you had a few mates. If I didn't win the talent show that week, they'd open the fire escape at the back and we'd nip in. So, yeah, there'd be a bunch of us. And it was kind of pre-girls,
Yeah, excellent. You don't know if any of those cinemas are still standing, do you? Are they all Weatherspoons now?
Yeah, the building of the Gaiety's still there. And for sure, the original Regal is still there. And that was a social club for a bit. They tried to make it run and
right.
I think it's shut its doors. But it's really funny. It's like a traditional old cinema where it had probably got 12 steps. So you were probably 6 foot in the air walking in the foyer. And I remember sitting on those steps and having me Kia and me popcorn, Yeah, great.
It's so grand. I just love it. I just love the architecture of those buildings. It's amazing.
All of it. It's just such a tragedy. And in Doncaster, they've knocked down the Odeon. It's a car park that's not even a car park. It's just gravel. And they, supposedly it had a fire. And, the Beatles played there. It was a beautiful, probably 1,000 plus. I played it, in fact, with one of my club bands. We played it. It was Concert for Bangladesh was the opening act, and then we would go on and play. That was just magic.
So growing up in Worksop during like the late 50s and 60s, what was your family dynamic back then? Because your dad was a military man, right?
I think my dad was out of the military by the time I was 18 months old. I didn't see my dad till I was 14 months old, apparently. Down at Portsmouth, met him on the docks. But he was definitely my dad. But yeah, he was a boy sailor, 7 years. He'd done the world, sailed around the world, fought in the Korean War. And then he just drifted, he worked at the pit. He worked as a tyre fitter. And then he ended up, most of the end of his life was working on buildings, as a concrete, putting the floors in and the footings, which is something I joined him on. Just to keep the dream alive. When I got a bit skint with the bands, I'd be, in disguise, laying concrete.
Was music that came along really early then? Was it you hearing it on the radio or live music in clubs?
Very early, I say, would be listening to Lonnie Donegan and the Chipmunks and then Cliff and the Shadows. And then the Beatles changed everything, like they did for nearly everybody. Just everything froze, in time.
Yeah, just a flick switch.
Just a flick switch, And it's funny, I was talking to somebody today, a guy doing my bathroom, and he was talking about the Beatles and how he just downloaded something on Spotify. And he was saying some of it wasn't great. Most of it was wonderful. And I took his point. I'd say, it would be very easy to pick up half a dozen of the not so good Beatles songs and go to a young kid, oh, this is what you should be listening to. And they go, I think that's crap or whatever. But I mean, Penny Lane, Eleanor Rigby, I mean, crikey, they're just masterpieces, aren't they,
I was saying to my wife one time, there was a Beatles song on the radio one time. I can't remember what it was. It was to do with John Lennon's anniversary of his death, I think, recently. And it was a Beatles song which I wasn't that familiar with, but just the melodies straight away. It was just...
Yeah, you knew.
It was just unreal. It was so good.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they were just gifted. It's just that moment in time, kind of the light shines on you and you're just magical for a few years,
For sure. And you entered the world of performing. Was you 12 years old with the band The Silence?
Yeah, The Silence, that was Worksop, Miners' Welfare. 6 guineas we got.
Yeah.
And there was a school band, me, the drummer and a guitar. We didn't have a bass player. My dad became the manager. And it was we lived in a council house and we're the outhouse and the coal house. And he converted the outhouse into a soundproof room. It was about 2 yards square. It was deafening.
Was he into it then? Was he getting a kick out of it?
He was the manager, and we bought an old army ambulance, like a Morris J4. And we did 150,000 miles before I was 15, gigging around England with my dad at the wheel. It was magic times.
When was you gigging? Was it all weekends and stuff?
Yeah, it was mainly Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then there was a taxi firm in Worksop called Hoppy's Taxis. And he had a big black, like a Thunderbird or a Cadillac. And we could get all the gear in the back of that. And I remember we used to, if we were playing local, we'd watch the Monkeys. Remember the Monkeys used to be on at 5 o'clock. You're not as old as me, I don't think. So you'd watch the Monkeys at 5 o'clock. Hoppy'd Pappy's on at 6. And we'd come throw the gear in the back of the thing. And we'd think we were the Monkeys, and we'd go off and play the British Legion Club, And,
what sort of stuff was you playing?
You'd play what the covers of the day were, what was on the radio. But I always loved the really rock. I'd do Little Richard and stuff, be doing Lucille and all that. A few Beatles things, Monkeys, obviously. Just all that. I mean, it's a lot of 60s music, wasn't it? It was just cool stuff.
Did things just catch on? Because that's a lot of shows to be doing for your very first band. Normally a first band lasts for a few months, somebody leaves, they're not into it. But it seems like that caught on pretty well.
Well, yeah, we were together as that same 3-piece, I think, up to leaving school. I remember I was a dreamer at school, always looking out the window, and the teachers would just single me out and go, you'll never make nothing, you'll never do, you've got to knuckle down. And then we played the school dance. I was leaving school, played the school dance, and we stormed it. And they all came up and said, forget everything we ever said, this is what you should be doing.
Wow.
So it was sweet. And me and the drummer stayed together. The guitar player left. We got another local guy in, and we stayed together, turned pro. They were doing apprenticeships, mining apprenticeships. So the drummer, Mick Brady, he was electrician apprentice, and Trevor Kirk, he was an apprentice. And we got this offer to go be in Guernsey, professional, for £100 a week between us.
Yeah.
But this was 1970. And we got accommodation, and it was 13 shows a week, 4 hours a night, 2 hours at lunchtime, with a Sunday afternoon off. Yeah, we were together there for 6 months. I never drank for that 6 months, and I saved all the money, all my 30 quids, to buy that Les Paul, the Stars and Stripes.
Oh, wow, that's the one that came from all that. That's amazing.
Yeah, the one I still got, yeah.
You guys must have been a well-oiled machine after that stint.
Oh, man, it was so great. I mean, you can imagine, I mean, the other two were had a bit more experience than me, but I was green as grass and 19 and lived at home. Suddenly we were 3 lads with a bachelor house next door to the club. So it was just hot and cold running women,
Never bothered with the bass player?
We never had a bass player then, no. But the other guy played an organ, so he had the bass pedals.
Okay.
Yeah.
That filled
We didn't have
it
a bass
out
player then at all. But yeah, probably never played with a bass player. I did in the middle, yeah. So I kind of had one when I was about 16, 17. And then, yeah, we just never missed it somehow,
No. Just harking back to the Beatles and when you're playing that often and that regular, I spoke to somebody one time saying when the Beatles were originally in Liverpool, they were kind of like your regular band. Then they went to Hamburg and they did all that intense playing. They came back from Hamburg and they just wiped the floor with everybody because they were just so well oiled by that point, by the time they came back. It just makes such a difference.
Rob, I was having this conversation this afternoon about exactly that. When you play 4 hours a night, every night, it's like shorthand between you is amazing. And my friend was one of the house producers at Abbey Road, not on the Beatles sessions. He did Cilla Black and Cliff and everybody. But he was sat in on one of the Beatles sessions. And they did one of those albums in an afternoon then. It was, I think, one of those that one where they're looking at it's like a best of, But They just go in and sometimes just go straight to stereo, just record, Brilliant.
At what point did you start writing your own songs?
Well, I've always grown up with dogs. We always had a pet dog. And the second dog was a dog called Mick. So I wrote My Dog Mick when I was about, my dog Mick, he's as slender as a stick, fast as a rabbit and as stubborn as a mule. Nothing I can handle after all. He's a doggone fool.
Wow.
I was about 7. So I was always doing it. And then, it's like if you play clubs, play something we know. So they don't really want to hear your own. So you'd slip one song in or two. But I'd always be trying. But I suppose I didn't really knuckle down to writing properly until the van blew up. We were about 30. The van blew up and so did the band. And there was nothing. And my wife said, look, I'll pay the bills. You write songs. And that's when I knuckled down. So like that kind of 2-year period, I just knuckled down to writing. One of the lads I was in a band with, he was a hairdresser. He had a few bob and he said, I'm going to build a little 8-track studio. If you build it, I'll buy the gear. Well, I mean, I didn't know one end of a saw from the other, but I did it and we built this studio. And I was able to record 8-track. And my wife, Sharon, she worked at Midland Bank. I was living in Donny. So she'd drive to the bank. I'd take the car from there. Studio was in Athersage. 8 hours recording, drive back, pick her up and go home. That was my life for 2 years. We were broke. We really broke. Coppering up, that expression. And, that's why I think putting value on albums, we'd buy ourselves an album once a month. And it took a lot to 7 or 8 quid. It was a lot of thinking to do it. I remember buying Toto 4, Foreigner 4, the Asia album, that first Asia album. I remember, and Earth, Wind and Fire, Chicago. And a weird thing is, I remember sitting on my lounge carpet when I was about 32 playing Toto 4 and I cried because Toto 4 is just so great, isn't it? I thought, I'm never, ever going to be able to compete. And a year later, I'm on the road with them and they're in the Wings, whatever. And they played on some of my records. We became pals, And Foreigner too, it's just weird how if you keep on and you keep trying, dreams can happen,
That's interesting you saying that. You said you was listening and thinking, I'm not going to be able to compete with this. But yeah. What's one of your cool sayings I've heard you say one time? Measure yourself against the best, put the gloves on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. If you think of the 60s and you think of Tamla Motown, a lot of the black artists, it's like they're touched by God, aren't they? You just look at them and think, man, it's like, I know we've got all this kind of racial thing now, but I mean, man, so many of my heroes are black, and I don't even think of them as being black, it's just, they're the kings and queens of our industry and the songwriting and the musicianship. So, it would be, it would be James Brown, it would be the Four Tops, Temptations, obviously Michael Jackson, and then of course Jimi Hendrix and Eric, the Kings, Jeff Beck, people that you just trying to reach. Yeah, I mean, never touch it. I'm reaching.
You're aspiring.
I'm aspiring to it. It's that thing about setting the bar. You're just trying to jump that high, and you might not do it, but it don't have to make you jump higher than you think.
I love that. So you started writing your songs and you landed a publishing contract in 1983, I believe.
Yeah.
Was that something that you was kind of, let's say, aware of and knew that was a good way to go as a musician and songwriter rather than seeking the record deal?
No, I was green as grass. I didn't really understand it at all. And I took to selling a bit of double glazing to keep it rolling. And this guy, he had an alter ego called Calvin Twilight. He was like an Alvin Stardust impressionist. But he reckoned he had some contacts in London. And I'd already met this guy called Kip Trevor. He'd been to a few of my live shows. And he'd said to me, if you want to sign a deal with us. And I thought, I don't really understand publishing now. Anyway, this Calvin Twilight character, Ray, he said, I've got your deal with this company, 500 quid. I went, go on then. There's nothing happening. So 500 quid. The lawyer was 400. The train was 50 quid. So I made 50 quid. But the beauty was, Kip, he was the creative manager there. And he believed in me. They gave me 100 quid every time I wrote a song to make a demo of. So that was the bonus. I could pay musicians. And some of the musicians in Sheffield, like Dave Clayton, he was just like a great keyboard player. He went on to be George Michael's MD and Simply Red, Mick Hucknall's one. He's with Anastasia now. And he met my son. I was doing a show for Kenny Jones a couple of years ago. And my son met him and he went, your dad is the reason I succeeded. And I thought, how sweet. He just said, yeah, he pushed me so hard. He was like reaching for the stars, And I was paying him 30 quid. It was good money. but 30 quid. And I'd drive him insane. No, could it just be a bit more? I was always trying to push him, and it worked. It pushed myself harder than anybody, but it's all within us. It's just how far we're prepared to go for it,
And the publishing deal, is that what led to Meat Loaf hearing some of your material? You guys met at a show in Newcastle.
Yeah. They started sending tapes out. Kip phoned me up and he said, we've had Meat Loaf's manager on, and he wants to meet with John next week. He's playing Newcastle City Hall. Will John go up and meet him? So I thought, right, I went in the studio. For that week, I studied Jim Steinman. I studied the Dead Ringer album, and I studied Bat Out of Hell. And Jim writes in a very different way to anybody else. For a start, Jim, he ain't scared to repeat himself. So if you repeat yourself 3 times, Jim will do it 5 times. And by the 5th one, it's somehow cool again. And he'll write 5-section songs rather than verse, bridge, chorus. So I wrote a couple of songs, but I can impersonate people. It's with being in the clubs, so I could be Meat Loaf. So I sang them like Meat Loaf. So when I met him at Newcastle, I gave him the cassette. We got on great, but I thought that'd be the end of that. But he called me the next day and he said, I love it. Will you fly over to America next week? I want you to come live with me for a bit and the family, and I'm making a new record. We want you to be part of it. And I literally did. He picked me up at the airport, in New York. I'd never been to America before. Went to his house, lived there for a couple of months, and I'd be in the studio with a rocking, kicking band, some of which were the E Street Band, which was Springsteen's band as well. And bear in mind, I'd only been in my little 8-track studio. I was ready. I'd done my 4 hours of Beatles time, and live-wise, and I knew my way around. I was ready. But it was just weird that guitar player Bob Kulick, played on all these records, said to me, do you think this is right, John? Do you think I should be doing that? Whatever. I was in, and it was like, and they said to me, you fit like an old shoe. I was stuck with it. What a lovely thing, and there was no ego, no pretense. I've never been scared to say, think there's another one in there, or whatever. Because if his guitar playing's better, he gains, not me. And it worked, and Meat and I formed a friendship that we still talk, and, crikey, it's 30-odd years. We had a little blip in the middle, but that's show business,
For sure. And the American journey continued when you got your own record deal, scored the hit with Naughty Naughty. Do you remember the reaction from back home when all of a sudden this local lad is like blowing up in another country?
It was weird because it was kind of still rumblings, because Naughty Naughty had not been released in England. My deal was with Atlantic. It was just for America, Japan, and then I had a deal with Phonogram for the rest of the world, but nothing in the UK. So it was rumblings in the music press, I remember my mate John Verity and Terry Utley from Smokey. Remember, you bastard, how did you manage that? It was so funny because they knew they'd seen it all, John Verity had been my mentor, he's like older than me, and I can remember having a multi-track tape machine for the first time, and I tried to get in the band Argent. I don't know if you remember the band Hold You Up.
Yeah.
But John actually got the gig, so he was in Argent, he took Russ Ballard's place, and I dreamed of that gig. And again, really weird. I played Madison Square Garden, and Russ was in the band. And the weird thing was, about 10 years ago, this guy said to me, I was in a band, and he said, we're going down to Russ Ballard's place to do some writing. And that'd be great. He says, I'm with Russ now. I said, I remember this great moment on stage, and me and Russ were like sharing a microphone, and we were busking, twist and shout. Everybody got it wrong, but me and Russ were on the mic together. And it was like a meeting of minds. And Russ come on the phone, he went, I've got that picture, I'm looking at it now. It's on my studio wall. And we hadn't spoken even since then. And he was my hero, again, just magical. And it's become a power rush, and he's a very talented man and written some incredible records. Funny how life is.
Things keep crossing paths so many years later.
Yeah, good guys win in the end, I think.
Obviously, a real tipping point for you was getting the chance to work alongside David Foster on the song Man in Motion from St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah.
How aware was you of David Foster and his body of work? Because just a minute ago you mentioned Chicago, so was you aware of everything he'd been doing?
I usually read everything on albums, but it escaped me that these 2 albums that were like among my favourites were him. I was on the road with Toto. We were doing a tour in America, and because they knew him well. And I said, I've just got this phone call from a guy called David Foster, and they kind of went, oh yeah. And I said, yeah, he wants me to write with him on this movie. He loves Naughty Naughty. And they went, well, he likes collecting things. He's quite successful. They didn't tell me too much. So when I went, I wasn't overawed because I didn't know that much. I didn't know the 18 Grammys and all the bit. So when I went, it was just a little studio in Los Angeles called The Lighthouse. And I walked in and he was exhausted because it was his first movie he'd ever done the soundtrack for. But he was also doing 10 individual tracks, like of pop songs, to fit in the movie with 10 different artists. And I was going to be one of them. And he goes, "Great you've come, John," he said, "but I really don't want to write anything. I'm knackered. Will you sing this?" And he played me this song and it was like 10th track on a record. And I went, "I think we could do better." And he went, "What do you mean?" I went, "Can we just have half an hour?" And he went, "I'm screwed, man. I'm knackered." Don't I said, "Please, just that's half an hour." He went, "Go on then." So we went in the control room and there's like a Fender Rhodes there and a drum machine. In fact, it was Roger Lynn's very first prototype, and it had wires hanging out of it and everything. It was like freaky because it sounded like a drummer. And we wrote this song in about 2-3 minutes, and I thought, wow, this is good. And he went, "We can do better." "Wow, you've changed the tune." So we started again, wrote another song about 5-10 minutes. I thought, man, this is it. He went, "We can do better." And then the fourth song was St. Elmo's Bush. We did it all in about 2 hours. But it was just, not words. It was just melodies. And it, obviously he's brilliant. So all the chords he's playing, I'm writing the top line, I'm singing the melodies, and he's just playing all this incredible stuff. So we get St. Elmo's. We know we've got something. Again, Beatles. I don't know how well you know St. Elmo's, or are you musical?
I play bass. Whether you consider that musical, I don't know.
Well, if you listen at the way it resolves after the first chorus, it's a key change. So you've got to get back down to the key. So he uses a chord, and it's a Beatles chord. Took him ages to find it, to get back down. So that the Beatles came in there. But anyway, I couldn't come up with the lyrics for it because St. Elmo's Fire's lost on me, these rich kids in college. And, I left school at 15. I come from Worksop. It was a comprehensive. So the director comes down, Joel Schumacher, very famous director. He did Batman. "I'll tell you the story, John." He's passed. He's a lovely guy, but he's screaming, he's like, but a great fella. And I just didn't get it. So David says to me, "Look, this has nothing to do with the movie." He said, "But this guy came in to the studio last week from Vancouver," which is David's, kind of origin. So it was like a little local news program, like, I don't know what your local news is. It's Calendar in Yorkshire or up north. So it's like a little one of those things. And this guy's on screen, like you and me. You can only see him from the waist up. And he looked beautiful, young man, 19, looked like young Kennedy. And he goes, "A year ago, I was able-bodied, but I had a car crash, put me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. But I'm not going to sit here and take it. I'm going to get him in a wheelchair. I'm going to wheel it around the world and raise money for spinal research." And then it cuts to him setting off. And it's just a back, as him wheeling away on a backup transit type thing. And it says, "Rick Hansen, Man in Motion World Tour." Poof, hairs are up on the back of my neck. So I go back to the hotel that night. On hotel note paper, it was the Mondrian Hotel. I sat there and I wrote his story, entirely about a man trying to get around the world in a wheelchair. St. Elmo's Fire to me is, well, it's a freak of nature. It's phosphorus glowing in the sky. So he's wheeling towards his dream. This is what I've got in my head. But I think, right, the film company ain't going to buy it. So the pair of wheels they'll think's Demi Moore's Jeep. For once in his life, a man has his time is when Emilio gets the girl. They'll swallow it. So I come in the next day and David's not having it. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, "We got to do it, man. You showed me the video." He said, "Yeah, but I didn't think you'd write his story." I said, "Well, worse than that, I want to call it Man in Motion." He went, "It's St. Elmo's Fire and it's like a big Sony Columbia Pictures. They ain't going to buy it." But this was the Saturday. Monday, it was being dubbed into the picture. So it went from the studio straight into the picture. It was locked. It was in stone. And they went, "Oh, yes, Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion." Somebody in the office. That was it. It was locked in stone.
Wow.
So they bought it all. And took Rick another 2 years to wheel around the world. When he set off on that video, there's like 4 men and a dog waving him off in the rain. And when he wheeled back in, there's 1 million people lining the streets. All the brass bands are going, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all the marching bands. And me and David in the arena playing St. Elmo's as he wheels in. It's like this stuff dream. And we raised up to $18 million that day. Now it's 30 years later, the money raises $275 million, not just by the song, but by the campaign. But it was the thing, but all from a guy writing it on a piece of paper and 2 guys in a room. So all your listeners out there, man, I was like you. But I believed and I practiced and I didn't look who was in between me. I looked at the kings and queens. That's what I looked at. Just aim at the best,
Did you and Rick Hansen become friends?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally. He wouldn't meet me in the wheelchair. He would only meet me stood up. He met me on the crutches. He sent me a great telegram. It was telegram days then. Like if it was on Facebook, it'd be everywhere, but there was no coverage. And so, he could have quit easily. He tore both shoulder muscles after 9 weeks. And it's an incredible story, And the physio came out to do his shoulders. And he ended up marrying her. They got 2 kids now. But it's like this dream. You can't believe it. But he said, I could have quit. And he said, I remember I got in the truck and he said, that's it. And he said, I played the song and I went out and did another 20 miles. And he put that in a telegram, you know. And
there's something magical about that song, John. It gets you every time.
it's because it's just real and true and no artifice, you know.
The melodies, the lyrics, the passion, it's superb.
Thank you.
The success of Man in Motion really opened the door for you to work on more movies, from
Totally.
3 Men and a Baby and The Running Man, just to name 2. Outside of Man in Motion, is there a particular song you're most proud of?
I think The Running Man, that's a funny story. Film companies get tired of their title. See, The Running Man, it's a great film, but it's such a magic title, The Running Man. But film companies have lived with that title for 5 years. And it's like, if Sony Pictures have had their time over, they go, don't call it St. Elmo's, don't call it, because it's a dead title to them by now. So I didn't realise this. And I went to Munich to record it and write it with Howell Faltermeyer. And Howell had just done Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop, so he was biggest right on the planet. So we go in there, we write it in a flash. But the original thing I wrote and sang was, would you bet your life on a running man, roll the dice, make a one life stand? Perfect. The movie's about a man running, people are betting that he's going to die. Perfect. So we record it, all the bit. Then a week later, the film company come back and go, we don't need to call it The Running Man. So they go back to Munich and rewrite it. And it turned into No More Lonely Nights with a Restless Heart. Roll the dice, make a brand new start. Well, it's good, but it's not as good as Would You Bet Your Life on a Running Man? Because that's it. So, you know, I don't even have the original master of that, which I did, because which we recorded, because it was just bang on. Yes, so I'm proud of that. And of course, proud of, I think, Under a Raging Moon for Keith Moon, you know, because I think Julia Downs and I really nailed that.
Did you ever get a chance to attend any premieres of the films?
I'm not good on all that.
No.
I remember going to see St. Elmo's Fire at a paying customer. I went Westwood. It sounds glamorous. Westwood's quite a trendy cinema. I didn't know. But I was there, like a little 400-seat cinema in LA, and I went in one afternoon and watched it. I've never been on the red carpet and done that. It's not my thing. I like the creative process, and, you know, it's cost me my career in many ways. You know, David used to say to me, there's the room, go schmooze it. I'm good at big talk. I'm useless at small talk. So if you want to have a big talk, great. You know, David, you know, is one of the biggest careers in music, and he'll say it's 50% schmoozing and networking and 50% talent. I don't believe it. He's gifted, you know, uniquely gifted. But it is that. It is about networking, and I should have done it more. And also, you know, pushing hard can sometimes not win you friends when you push and you're driving people that hard. Some people just not in them, they you know. And,
yeah, you've got to be comfortable in yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, you know, and I'm a guy I'm after that last ounce, you know, and don't care how I get it.
I spoke to Stan Bush a while ago, who also became a go-to guy for 80s movie soundtracks, and I suggested a great tour would be you, Stan Bush and Robert Tepper, a storyteller's night from the 3 of you doing movie soundtrack songs. That'd be amazing.
It would be great. Sylvester Stallone's brother, Frank Stallone, did quite a few soundtracks. And Frank said to me that, he said, we should do this like night at the movies thing. You bang on, you know, with the 2 or 3 guys, maybe just with acoustics playing. And I got so many funny stories about the behind the scenes stuff in all of them. There's always a quirk.
You obviously continue to write, record and release music. You got your own studio where you're speaking to today. In the past, you got a chance to work with your hero, Mutt Lange, on the Romeo's Daughter album. Everything I've heard about that seems to be a positive experience.
Totally. I was blessed. I think I don't know about modern day, but at that point he'd only ever co-produced with Mick Jones from Foreigner. So he was my absolute idol. And they say don't meet your heroes, but the man is bigger than that. He's just one of the greatest people I ever met. I love him to bits. You know, he's quite reclusive, but I got to spend, you know, probably a couple of months with him, with the band, and we created this thing together. And he's hilarious because the studio is his domain. Even though he's kind of this reclusive, he's such a raconteur in that room. You'd never know, but he's just so engaging, you know, and so talented. I learned so much. And then it's really funny, when I worked with Foreigner a couple of years back and I was talking to Mick, and Mutt had said to me, I learned more from Mick Jones than anybody else. And I was able to tell Mick that, and he didn't know. And it was such a special moment that I thought, again, it was one of those really freaky things. And again, you know, what do you say to Mick Jones? You know, I'd met Mick and Foreigner in 1984. Naughty Naughty was a big hit, and they just got the next album after Foreigner 4 out. And we were together on a boat. They were launching an album launch. It was incredible. On a big motor launch going around Manhattan at night. Oh. So there's Foreigner, and it's just wild. And they went, oh, yeah, we're going to get you to open for us. Because they said, when we play Naughty Naughty in the mixtape before we go on, everybody cheers. And we think, oh, we're late to go on. We think that the opening act's finished. So we've got to have you. Anyway, it never happened for 30 years, but I eventually opened for them last time they were over. But I remember what it was like for me when I played the Albert Hall for the first time. And my dad had always said to me, I don't know why you need all this gear. You just need a stool, a guitar, and tell him a few stories and whatever. And I got to do it with Richard Marx. And that's exactly what happened. It was just, I got a standing ovation. And I tried to go, you were right, Dad. So when Foreigner played everywhere, but they'd never played the Albert Hall. And Mick, as a child, had always dreamed of playing it, but had never played it. So the band couldn't understand what the big deal was. They played Carnegie Hall, which is their big one. I goes, well, watch out when Mick plays this because something's going to happen. Anyway, he went on, he walked to them, he played all the guitar solos strange. And when he tried to speak, he broke down. And that's after all that career, you know. Just something magical about that moment, isn't it? In your, you know, it's like playing at the Regal at Worksop, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but it is, though, you know, it's like playing at the Miners' Welfare. Believe me, if you can play the Miners' Welfare Worksop, you can do Madison Square Garden. You can.
Super. Oh, I love
you know,
that.
you can and get away with it, you know.
I saw you on that Richard Marx tour in Birmingham. That was a great bill. A wonderful night that was.
That was a great night, wasn't it? Well, he and I wrote that song. We wrote a song about it that night. It's on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's Birmingham. Richard said to me, why don't you me do a song in my set? I went, yeah, great. He went, what about I Hear You Knocking? You know, it's a great song, but it's a bit of throwaway. So when we were at Birmingham, I knocked on his door at 3:00 in the afternoon. I went, you know that song? He went, yeah. I said, why don't we write it? What song? I went, let's write one about being in Birmingham tonight. It was raining that day, if you remember. So we wrote a song about being in the Symphony Hall in Birmingham. And it's a song called Like Brothers. Check it out on YouTube, me and Richard. I lose it completely, but the audience go with it. It's just a magic night. Yeah, Richard's a good guy. And Richard should have sung on St. Elmo's Fire. On second verse, don't know just how far that I can go. Somebody else goes, just how far I go.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that is actually Richard Page from Mr. Mister singing that line. But it should have been Richard, because he worked with David, but he was off that day.
Oh, man.
And I always say to him, Richard, imagine what your career could have been if you'd have just sang that. So it's always a running joke with me and him. But yeah, it's a small world, isn't it?
Yeah, crazy. Just to throw things back, isn't there some other Def Leppard connections to you in that the late Steve Clark used to come and watch your gigs at the Working Men's Club?
When I first started working with Meat Loaf, living with him and doing the album, he said, I've got some shows to do in England. Will you play guitar with us? I did a few shows, but one of them was Lift Off. Do you remember Mike Manson? He'd go, 3, 2, with the blonde head. He'd go, Lift Off, whatever. So we go, and Def Leppard are there. Well, of course, Def Leppard are from Sheffield, and they actually recorded in that little studio I built in Hathersage. They did some of the demos there. And I knew Joe had worked in the steel factory, but I didn't know Steve. And I do this trick with the plectrum. I'm more famous for that. So when I'm playing a solo, I flick the plectrum up my back, catch it, or catch it in my mouth and do this. And I walked into the dressing room, and so Def Leppard were like huge. And Steve, flicker. And he comes up and like puts his arms around. He goes, my dad used to take me to see you at Dial House Club in Sheffield. You're my hero, you know, whatever. And it, again, isn't it funny, you know? I mean, we were great. Though we were working with club band, we were red hot. You know, we deserved a shot. And I was practicing 8 hours a day. And, you know, you're like as a guitar player, you're a gunslinger. So I think I kind of upset all the guitar players. So I'd be playing solos and kicking the plectrum and never missing it.
I've got to ask you now then, because I do the plectrum throwing thing as well, but I stole it from a guy called Butch Walker and a band called Ballin' for Soup, and I think they stole it from Rick Nielsen in Cheap Trick. I'm just wondering, when did you start doing it? I'm trying to trace who started that.
Well, there used to be a band called the Peddlers. I loved them. They were a jazz trio, and they played the Bailey Circuit and Batley Variety Club. They had a drummer called Trevor Moraes, a black guy, phenomenal drummer, but he did all these tricks with the sticks. He'd be playing the drums, throw the stick on the floor, catch it and do it. And we had that drummer I told you about that was in the band with me right from being 12. He's really lazy. So I wanted him to do all these tricks, but he wouldn't do them. So I learned all these tricks with the drumstick. I could do them all. Anyway, he eventually learned to do it, but I had no trick left. So I thought, what can I do? So I thought I'll do it with the plectrum. So I don't know. I mean, but I've been doing it since longer than them. I was doing that 1968.
Wow. You got to be the originator of that, John.
Yeah, and in Naughty Naughty, it's on the video. So the Naughty Naughty video is 84, and that's the first time you see it on video.
Superb.
Yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, I'd never seen anybody do it. And then Ricky Phillips does it. He's in Styx now. And Ricky was in the Babies. And Ricky was my bass player, toured with me in America. And then he nicked it off me. So when you see Styx videos, you'll see him doing things, which I'm going to punch him for next time I see it.
Looking back, how crazy is it for you, and talking about it in the best possible way, that someone like yourself and Def Leppard, both from the Yorkshire area, were responsible for some of the biggest hits in the 80s. I think that's amazing. It's a bit surreal, really.
It is amazing. You know, and you think as well, Joe Cocker and Paul Carrick were both born on the same street in Sheffield. There was a lot of talent in Sheffield, and there's a pub in Sheffield called the Black Swan, and all the bands, the London circuit bands, played there. So that set the standard, and I think people looked at that standard, and again, it brought the level up. So a lot of talent came out of it. I mean, the Grease band must have been amazing with Joe. I can't imagine what they must have been like. Joe was already getting older and struggling a bit when he had Mad Dogs and Englishmen, but, you know, just stunning, you know. And I think the lucky break for the Leps was really just meeting the song doctor with Mutt. Leps would come up with great riffs and great ideas, and Mutt would go, well, that's a song. And, you know, his genius turned that. It is freaky. You know, the good thing about the Leps, certainly, you know, now Rick and Joe, I see if we do something for charity in Sheffield, they're the first there. Rick and Joe will be there, so I'll see them there. And there's no ego. There's just, you know, hey, mate, what you doing, you know, ever. Obviously, you have to keep the persona on, but there is none of that. We are who we are. We've never lost that, really, you know. For me, you know, I take no credit for it. I'm a craftsman. I put my hours in. Any success I've had has been gifted to me by something bigger than me. You know, I'm just open to it, you know. So I think as soon as you think it's me, you've lost it.
John, thank you ever so much. What's your current projects at the moment? What are you working on?
Yeah, a new album. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. We've had the film crew in filming all the making of it. We've got some magic. We really got some real love and human spirit in there. Really genuine. Got Kenny Jones playing on a few tracks. I wrote a couple of songs for Kenny. Kenny's the last man standing from the Small Faces. So I wrote him a song called Last Man Standing about that. There's only him and Woody from the Faces left. So I wrote him a song called Sweeter the Second Time Around, which is about the past members looking down. And to have Kenny playing on it is just... And he's on camera, and it's just... And it was just him and me in the studio. It was just recorded with him and me. And then we laid it up. And he goes, last time I did this was with Mick Jagger when we did It's Only Rock and Roll, but I Like It. And you're thinking, pinch me, you know.
You've still got that little fanboy in you somewhere, have you, John?
How can you not? You know, I mean, you think if you lose that, it's just the love of it. You know, I mean, we all know what it takes, and it's show business, but nonetheless, I've grown up with it, and they're among my favourite records, and I love the way Kenny plays. And on top of that, he's a wonderful bloke, and he's just normal. And he's as northern as we are, because he's from the East End, and the East End are just like us lads, you know, really.
John, I've loved chatting with you. I really appreciate your time.
It's been great, Rob. It's been great, mate, yeah. And I'm meeting the minds, you know.
Thanks, John. Take care, mate.
I'll go get me dinner.
What a legend! Thanks to John Parr for taking some time to talk to me here on the Straight to Video podcast. Be sure to keep up to date with John on Facebook and also through his official website, which is at johnparr.net. And please, if you can, consider having a look at the Straight to Video Patreon page, where you can become a bit of an insider on the show and bag yourself some exclusive perks and even merchandise which you won't find anywhere else. All of this can be found at patreon.com/STVpod. Those of you that are already on board should have a bonus episode winging its way to you very soon. Alright, that's it for episode 101 of the Straight to Video podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to chatting again real soon.